Warning. What you are about to hear is a masterclass in deception. We are analyzing the interrogation tapes of Elias Vane, a man accused of a crime that physics says is impossible. Tonight, we hunt for the moment the lie begins. Are you ready to see the mask slip? Welcome to Blackgate Penitentiary, a fortress of concrete and misery. It is a place where secrets rot in the walls. On the night of November 14th, the alarm shattered the silence. A prisoner was missing from cell 404, but the door was still locked from the outside. The missing man was Marcus Cole, a convicted arsonist serving life. When the guards opened the cell, they found only one person, his cellmate, Elias Vane. Vane was sitting on his bunk, staring at the empty space where Cole should have been, wearing a chilling smile. Investigators were baffled. The bars were solid. The ventilation shaft was too small for a human. There were no tools, no tunnels, and no witnesses. Just Vane. They dragged him to the interview room, convinced he knew exactly where the body was hidden. Vane sat in the chair, calm and collected. The Detective Miller, started with the basics. Where is he, Elias? This is where the first version of the story begins. Vane leaned forward, looked Miller in the eye, and claimed absolute ignorance. I was asleep, Vane said, his voice steady. I went to bed at lights out. When I woke up for the count, Marcus was just gone. Maybe he vanished into thin air. Magic, he chuckled, a dry sound that grated on the detective's nerves. It was too rehearsed. Detective Miller slammed his hand on the table. Magic doesn't exist in prison, Elias. People don't evaporate. He showed Vane photos of the cell. Look at the floor. It's clean. Too clean. If he left, he walked. If he died, where is the struggle? Vane shrugged. Marcus was a quiet guy. Maybe he learned to walk through walls. This flippant attitude is a classic defense mechanism. He is trying to trivialize the event to make himself appear unconcerned. But his eyes were darting around the room. The detective pressed harder. We found something under your bunk, Elias. A jagged piece of metal, sharpened. He produced an evidence bag containing a shiv made from a spoon handle. Did you cut him up? Did you flush him down the drain piece by piece? Vane's expression shifted. The smirk vanished. He looked at the shiv, then back at the detective. That's not for Marcus, he whispered. That's for protection. You don't know what lives in C Block at night. Marcus knew. That's why he left. Left? Miller caught the slip. You said he vanished. Now you say he left. How does someone leave a locked cage, Elias? This is the first crack in the foundation. Vane realized he had said too much. He paused, recalculating his narrative. He had a key, Vane said suddenly. This was story number 2. Marcus found a way to make a key. He was working on it for months. He melted down plastic toothbrushes and molded them. He left last night. He didn't take me because I would slow him down. Miller didn't buy it. A plastic key? For a heavy steel tumbler lock. It would snap in a second. He leaned in. Besides, the cameras in the hallway saw nothing. If he opened the door, we would see him walk out. The hallway was empty all night. Vane shifted in his seat. The chains on his wrists rattled against the table. Maybe he knew the camera blind spots. Marcus was smart. He planned this. I just watched him go. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be an accomplice. So you watched him open the door? Miller asked. Yes, Vane lied. And you watched him close it? Yes, Miller smiled predatorily. That's interesting. Because the lock on cell 404 is jammed. We had to use a blowtorch to get in this morning. Vane froze. He had walked right into the trap. If the lock was jammed, nobody opened it. He blinked rapidly, his mind racing to find a new explanation. The escape story was dead on arrival. He needed a new lie, and he needed it fast. It wasn't a key, Vane mumbled, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. I lied because you wouldn't believe the truth. You cops are all the same. You want logic. But what happened in that cell wasn't logical. It was something else. Miller crossed his arms. Try me. I've heard it all. Vane looked up, his eyes wide and terrified. This wasn't the arrogant criminal anymore. This was a man recalling a nightmare. Or perhaps a very talented actor setting the stage for story 3. Marcus didn't leave, Vane said. He was taken. But not by a guard. It came through the wall. I woke up and the wall. It was soft, like wet clay. Something reached out and pulled him in. He didn't even scream. He just sank into the concrete. The supernatural alibi. It's a desperate move, usually reserved for the insane or the cornered. Miller sighed. So now it's a ghost story? The wall ate him? Elias, we have forensics coming. If we find his DNA in the mortar, maybe I'll believe you. Check the wall, Vane screamed, suddenly aggressive. Check the bricks behind the bunk. It's hollow. That's where they live. The ones who run this prison. You think you're in charge? You're just the cattle guards. Miller signaled the guards. Calm down, or we strap you down. Vane was panting, sweat beading on his forehead. He had gone from sleeper to accomplice to witness of the paranormal. But the physical evidence was about to destroy everything. A knock at the door. A junior officer entered and handed Miller a note. Miller read it, and his face went pale. He looked at Vane with a new intensity. Elias ... The lab boys just found something in the cell. And it's not DNA. Vane went deadly silent. He stared at the note in Miller's hand. What did you find? He asked, his voice trembling. Miller placed the note on the table. We found a tooth, embedded in the steel door, from the inside, like someone tried to chew their way out. Vane closed his eyes. A single tear leaked out. I told you, he whispered. I told you he didn't want to leave. He was trying to get away from it. But it was already in the room with us. The story was about to change again. Vane stared at the photo of the tooth embedded in the steel. His eyes didn't show surprise. They showed resignation. He was hungry, Vane whispered. Not for food, for freedom. He broke his teeth trying to eat through the steel. I begged him to stop, but he couldn't hear me. This is story version 4. The madness. Vane is pivoting. He realizes the escape story failed, so now he claims Cole lost his mind. He was growling like an animal, Vane continued. He spent 3 hours gnawing on the door. Then he turned around and looked at me. Detective Miller wasn't buying it. If he was gnawing on the door for 3 hours, Elias, why didn't you call the guards? You have a panic button right next to your bunk. You watched him mutilate himself and did nothing? Miller pointed a pen at Vane's face. Vane hesitated. I tried, he lied. But the button? It wouldn't work. The wires were cut. Marcus cut them with his teeth before he started on the door. This is a verifiable lie. Tech services had checked the button that morning. It was fully functional. Miller slammed a report on the table. The button works, Elias. Strike 2. You sat there and let him hurt himself. Or ... Maybe you forced him? Did you smash his face into that door? Is that how the tooth got there? Miller leaned in, invading Vane's space. Vane recoiled. I didn't touch him. You don't understand. The room ... It changes people. Marcus wasn't Marcus anymore. He was a vessel. Vane was sweating now, his eyes wide. He was retreating into the supernatural defense, again to avoid the murder charge. A vessel for what? Miller asked, expecting a generic answer. Vane leaned forward, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. For the damp, for the rot in the walls. It got inside him. He didn't escape, Detective. He dissolved. He became part of the room. Miller rubbed his temples. He dissolved. Right. So if we check the drains, we'll find him? Vane shook his head violently. No, not the drains. The air. He turned into mist. I watched him evaporate. Story version 5. The sublimation. It was getting desperate. Let's look at the facts, Miller said, ignoring the ghost story. We found a journal under Cole's mattress. Did you know he was keeping a diary, Elias? Vane went rigid. This was information he hadn't prepared for. His eyes locked onto the evidence bag. He didn't write anything, Vane stammered. He couldn't read or write well. Miller opened the bag. On the contrary, his handwriting is excellent, and the last entry, dated yesterday, is very interesting. Would you like to hear it? Miller read aloud. Elias is watching me while I sleep. He stands over my bunk. He whispers things in a language I don't know. I think he's trying to open a door, but he's using me as the key. Miller looked up. You were the threat, Elias, not the room. Vane's face contorted. That's a lie. He was paranoid. The room made him paranoid. I was praying for him. Praying. Miller scoffed. In a language he didn't know? What language was that, Elias? Vane stayed silent, his jaw clenched tight. We checked your background, Miller continued. You spent 5 years in a mental health facility before prison. You were obsessed with occult rituals. Opening gates. Is that what you did to Marcus? Did you think you were sending him somewhere? Vane laughed. It was a cold, broken sound. You think this is a ritual? You think I sacrificed him? He looked directly into the camera. I didn't send him anywhere. I just stopped holding him here. I let him go where the walls wanted him. So you admit you killed him, Miller said, taking notes. No, Vane corrected. I admit I opened the door, not the steel door. The other one. The one in the corner where the shadows don't move right. Story version 6. The portal. Miller stood up. I'm done with the fairy tales. You killed him. You cut him up. And you flushed him. We're tearing the plumbing apart right now. When we find a piece of him, you're getting the chair. He turned to leave. Wait, Vane shouted. The plumbing is clean. Check the ceiling. If you want to find him, look up. Miller paused at the door. The ceiling? It's solid concrete, Elias. Just look. Vane screamed. Look at the scratch marks. Miller signaled the guard. Check cell 404 ceiling. Now. He sat back down. If there's nothing there, Elias, I'm putting you in the hole for a month. Vane was trembling. You'll see. Gravity didn't want him anymore. 10 minutes of silence passed. Vane rocked back and forth, mumbling. Miller watched him. Finally, the radio crackled. Detective ... You need to come down here. You need to see this. The voice on the radio sounded terrified. Miller grabbed the radio. What is it? Did you find the body? No body, sir, the officer replied. But the ceiling. It's covered in boot prints. Dusty boot prints. Hundreds of them. Like he was walking around upside down. Miller stared at the radio, and at Vane. Vane was smiling again. A sick, triumphant smile. I told you, Vane whispered. He walked on the ceiling for an hour, begging me to help him down. Then he just fell ... up. That's physically impossible, Miller muttered. Someone staged it. How? Vane asked. I'm 5'8". The ceiling is 10 feet high. No ladder, no chair. Did I throw him at the roof until his shoes stuck? The logic was breaking down. Miller was rattled. The escape was gone. The murder and flush theory was dying. He was left with an impossible crime scene and a suspect who was enjoying the show. Miller needed to regain control. What happened after he fell up, Elias? He went through, Vane said simply. The concrete turned to water for a second. He splashed into the ceiling. I heard him swimming in the stone for a while. Then silence. That's when I went to sleep. Story version 7, the liquefaction. Miller stood up, grabbing the chair. Get the tech team in here. I want a ground-penetrating radar on that ceiling. And get a priest. Or a physicist. I don't care. He looked at Vane. You're not going anywhere. Vane laughed. Neither are you. The tech team arrived with the GPR ground-penetrating radar. They aimed the device at the ceiling of cell 404, scanning the concrete slab. Miller watched the monitor, praying for a glitch. He wanted a logical answer. He wanted a hidden trapdoor. He didn't get one. The screen showed solid concrete, 18 inches thick, reinforced with steel rebar. But in the center, right where the dusty boot prints ended, there was a density shift. A void. A pocket of air shaped vaguely like a human fetus, trapped inside the solid stone. Miller returned to the interrogation room, slamming the printout on the table. "Explain this, Elias. There is a hollow spot inside the ceiling, shaped like a man. Did you cast him in concrete? Did you build the cell around him?" The questions were becoming irrational. Vane glanced at the image and yawned. "I didn't build anything. I told you, he fell up. The ceiling caught him. It digested him. You're looking at his digestion bubble. This is story version 8, the digestion. The room is now a biological entity. Buildings don't digest people," Miller snapped. "Is he dead in there? If we drill into that void, what will we find?" Vane smiled darkly. "You'll find the space where he used to be. But Marcus is gone. He's part of the architecture now." Miller pressed his earpiece. "Drill it. I want a fiber optic camera in that void immediately." He looked back at Vane. "If he's in there, you're looking at the death penalty." Vane leaned back. "You can't kill me. The walls won't let you." While the drill team worked, a lab tech entered with a sealed bag. "Sir, the tooth," she whispered. "We ran a spectrographic analysis. It's human, but it's wrong." Miller took the report. "Wrong how?" "It's calcified, like it's been fossilized for 1,000 years." Miller stared at Vane. "How did you age his tooth, Elias? Acid? Radiation?" Vane chuckled. "Time moves differently in the walls, detective. A second for you is a century for the stone. Marcus has been in that door for a millennium." Story version 9, the time dilation. "You're mixing your lies," Miller said. "First he's a ghost, and he's liquid. Now he's a time traveler?" Vane shrugged. "Maybe they are all true. Or maybe I'm just entertained by your confusion. You're trying to solve a puzzle with pieces from the wrong box." The radio crackled. "Sir, we punched through. The drill hit the void." Miller leaned in. "What do you see?" The voice on the radio was shaky. "It's ... empty, but the interior is lined with ... fabric. It looks like a prison uniform fused into the concrete." Miller went pale. A uniform fused into the stone from the inside. No seams. No poured cement marks. It was physically impossible. "Is there a body in the clothes?" he asked. "Negative. Just the clothes. Like he was vaporized out of them." Vane began to hum. A low, vibrating tune. Miller recognized it. It was the hum from the hallway audio tape. The hum that preceded the disappearance. "Stop that," Miller ordered. Vane continued, louder. The water in the glass on the table began to ripple. "He was vibrating," Vane said, stopping abruptly. "That's how he did it. He matched the frequency of the wall. He taught me the song. Do you want to learn it, detective? It opens the doors that don't have handles. Story version 10, the frequency." "So he vibrated through the ceiling?" Miller asked, exhausted. "And left his clothes behind?" "Inorganic matter doesn't vibrate the same," Vane explained, like a teacher to a slow child. "The soul goes, the cotton stays. Basic physics." Miller stood up. "I'm bringing in the warden. We're going to sweat the truth out of you." He opened the door, but the hallway was dark. The lights in the corridor had blown out. A cloud of dust rolled in from the darkness. "The building is waking up," Vane whispered. "You drilled a hole in it. You heard it. Now it's angry." Miller slammed the door and locked it. "Sit down. Nobody enters or leaves." He was trapped in the room with the suspect. The lights in the interrogation room flickered. Vane's shadow on the wall seemed to detach itself, stretching longer than his body. Miller drew his service weapon. Back away from the table, Elias. The tension was at a breaking point. You can't shoot a frequency. Vane laughed. Marcus tried to fight it too. Look what happened. He rolled up his sleeve. For the first time, he showed Miller his arm. The skin was covered in a pattern that looked like gray scales. Miller recoiled. What is that? Gangrene? It's the room, Vane said. It's touching me. I'm turning into it. Just like Marcus. We are the mortar now. He scratched the gray skin, and dust fell off instead of skin cells. The radio squawked, cutting through the fear. Detective, we found something else in the vent. Above the blockage, it looks like a cocoon. Miller kept his gun trained on Vane. A cocoon? Made of what? It's made of hair, sir. Human hair, woven tight. And there's something moving inside it. Miller felt bile rise in his throat. Burn it, he ordered. Don't open it. Just burn it out. Vane screamed, No, he's almost ready. Vane lunged at the table, snapping the chain on his handcuffs with impossible strength. The metal link didn't bend. It shattered like glass. He wasn't stronger. The metal had become brittle. The rot was affecting the room itself. Miller fired a warning shot into the two-way mirror. The glass didn't shatter. It rippled, swallowing the bullet like a pond swallowing a stone. The sound was muffled, dull. The room was losing its physical properties. Vane stood up, rubbing his wrists. You can't stop the change, Detective. The walls are porous now. He walked toward the solid concrete wall of the interrogation room. Watch. I'll show you where Marcus went. Vane reached out and pressed his hand against the wall. His fingers didn't stop. They sank into the concrete up to the knuckles. He turned to Miller, eyes glowing with a faint, dusty light. Come with us. It's quiet in here. Miller stared, his mind unable to process the sight. Vane's hand was buried wrist-deep in solid concrete. It wasn't a trick of the light. The stone rippled around his flesh like thick gray pudding. The smell of damp earth filled the sealed room. Vane slowly withdrew his hand. The concrete sucked weightily as it released him, then instantly smoothed over, leaving no trace of the intrusion. Vane held up his hand. It was coated in fine gray dust, his skin looking cracked and brittle like stone. Miller scrambled for the door. He grabbed the handle and pulled with all his strength. It didn't budge. It wasn't just locked. It felt fused to the frame. He kicked the steel, a futile gesture that sent pain shooting up his leg. You can't leave, Detective, Vane said, his voice echoing strangely. We are already inside the wall. This room isn't a room anymore. It's a stomach. Story version 11, the consumption. We are being eaten. Miller grabbed his radio. Mayday. Officer down in Interrogation 1. Get this door open. All he got back was static. Not normal static, but a grinding, rhythmic noise like stones rubbing together deep underground. He looked at the two-way mirror. It was no longer reflective. It had turned a dull, opaque gray. The glass had transformed into a slab of polished slate. They were sealed in a stone box with no windows and no doors. The overhead fluorescent light flickered and died. The emergency red backup lights pulsed on, bathing the room in the color of dried blood. The shadows lengthened, twisting into impossible shapes that seemed to reach out from the corners. In the red light, Vane looked less human. He stood perfectly still, his gray skin absorbing the illumination. He looked like a statue carved from granite, forgotten in a tomb. Only his eyes moved, tracking Miller's panic. Desperate, Miller grabbed the heavy metal interrogation table, trying to lift it to use as a battering ram. It wouldn't move. He looked down. The metal legs had sunk inches into the concrete floor, fused solid to the foundation. Then the sound started, not from Vane, but from the walls around them. A low moaning, like wind blowing through a cavern. Then scratching. Thousands of tiny scratches coming from every direction, closing in. Do you hear them, Detective? Vane whispered. "That's the choir. All the men who died in this prison. They are all still here, trapped in the mortar. They are singing a welcome song for us." A fine powder began to rain down from the ceiling. It wasn't just dust. It was gritty, smelling of old bone and lime. It coated Miller's hair and uniform, turning him gray. The room was trying to bury them alive. Miller coughed, the dust coating his throat. He tasted minerals and decay. He realized with horror that he was breathing in the prison itself. The very architecture was invading his lungs, claiming him from the inside out. "Story version 12, Vane announced, his voice sounding like grinding stones. "The final draft. There is no escape. Marcus didn't get out. I didn't get out. And now, Detective Miller, you aren't getting out either." The room felt smaller. It wasn't an illusion. The walls were physically pressing inward, inch by inch. The ceiling seemed lower. The air pressure became unbearable, making Miller's ears pop and his vision blur. Panic took over. Miller drew his gun and fired wildly at the encroaching walls. Bang, bang, bang. The bullets hit the concrete, but didn't ricochet. They sank into the stone with wet thuds, swallowed whole by the hungry room. Vane laughed, a sound that cracked like dry shale. "You're just feeding it metal. It likes metal. It liked Marcus's tooth. It likes your bullets. Soon, it will like your bones." The heat of the moment vanished, replaced by a staggering cold. Frost bloomed on the metal table surface in fractal patterns. Miller's breath came out in thick white clouds that froze in the air. Vane took a step toward the back wall. He didn't walk. He shuffled, his legs stiff and heavy as stone columns. He reached the wall and turned to face Miller. His eyes were now entirely gray, devoid of pupils or whites. "Goodbye, Detective," Vane whispered. He stepped backward. His body sank into the concrete wall, as if it were stepping through a curtain of water. He didn't vanish instantly. He faded into the texture, leaving only a ripple in the stone. Miller was alone in the shrinking stone box. The dust was so thick he could barely see the opposite wall. The red emergency lights flickered and died, plunging him into absolute suffocating darkness. In the dark, the moaning grew to a roar. The scratching became frantic clawing. He felt cold, heavy hands made of dust gripping his shoulders, pulling him down towards the floor that was no longer solid. Miller screamed, a sound that was instantly absorbed by the porous walls. He clawed at the floor, his fingernails breaking against the grit. He felt himself sinking, the concrete rising around his waist like quicksand. The dust filled his mouth, choking off his scream. The cold stone enveloped his chest and his neck. His last sight was the red recording light of the camera on the table, winking out forever. Silence returned to the interrogation room. The walls stopped moving. The dust settled. The door clicked faintly as the lock disengaged from the outside. The room waited for someone to find it empty. The heavy steel door of Interrogation Room 1 swung open. Warden Graves stood in the threshold, flanked by 2 armed guards. They expected a hostage situation. They expected violence. What they found was a vacuum of silence and a room that smelled of wet limestone. The room was empty, completely empty. The table, the chairs, the suspect Elias Vane, and Detective Miller were gone. There were no footprints leading to the door. The ventilation grates were bolted shut. It was a locked room mystery within a locked room. Graves stepped inside, his boots crunching on a thin layer of gray dust that covered the floor. He scanned the walls. They looked normal, perhaps a bit newer than the rest of the prison, the concrete smooth and unblemished. "Where are they?" a guard whispered. Graves didn't answer. He walked to the center of the room and bent down. Partially embedded in the concrete floor, gleaming under his flashlight, was a gold object. It was Detective Miller's badge. It wasn't lying on top of the floor. It was part of it. The metal was fused with the stone, as if the badge had been dropped into wet cement that hardened instantly. Graves touched it. It was ice cold. On the wall, they found the second piece of evidence. A pair of handcuffs, locked and closed, hanging from the concrete wall. But there was no hook. The chain went straight into the solid wall, disappearing into the masonry. "Lock it down," Graves ordered, his voice shaking. Nobody saw this. Miller and Vane escaped. They overpowered the guard and ran. That is the official story. Do you understand? The cover-up began before the dust had even settled. But the prison knew the truth. That night, guards on Seebach reported hearing voices coming from the pipes, not echoing through them, coming from the metal itself. One guard swore he heard Miller screaming for backup inside a radiator. The interrogation tapes were confiscated. The recording ended the moment the power failed. The last frame of video shows Miller drawing his gun, and Vane smiling. After that, just static. A static that, when analyzed, contained a low-frequency hum. Blackgate Penitentiary closed 3 years later. The official reason was budget cuts. The real reason was the attrition rate. Staff refused to work there. Inmates disappeared from solitary confinement with alarming regularity. The building was hungry. Today, the prison is a ruin, but the interrogation room remains. Urban explorers call it the stomach. They say if you place your ear against the wall, you can hear a heartbeat. A slow, rhythmic thumping deep in the foundation. Last month, a group of ghost hunters broke in. They brought ground-penetrating radar, the same tech Miller used. They scanned the walls of the interrogation room. The images they captured are nightmare fuel. The radar didn't show rebar and concrete. It showed density clusters shaped like people. Dozens of them, standing shoulder to shoulder inside the walls, frozen in silent screams. A crowded graveyard trapped in stone. One shape in particular stood out. It was kneeling on the floor, hand outstretched as if reaching for a dropped weapon. The radar confirmed a metallic anomaly right where the hand would be holding a gun. Miller is still on duty, and standing over him in the scan was another figure, taller, merged with the wall behind it. Elias Vane kept his promise. He didn't escape. He became the architect. He became part of the frequency that opens the stone. The explorers tried to drill a sample core. As soon as the drill bit touched the wall, the room temperature dropped 50 degrees. Their batteries died instantly. Their flashlights exploded. They fled in total darkness. They recovered one audio file from a backup recorder. In the chaos of their escape, a voice can be heard. It isn't a whisper. It sounds like two heavy stones grinding together to form words. It says, Story version 13. What is version 13? Perhaps it's the story where we join them. The prison is abandoned, but the doors are open. It sits there, waiting for the curious, the brave, and the skeptical to walk inside and check the acoustics. Vane was a liar, a manipulator, and a psychopath. But his stories were the only truth Miller ever heard. He tried to warn the detective. He told him the walls were porous. He told him about the hunger. Miller just didn't listen. So we are left with a question. When a prisoner changes his story 10 times, do you stop listening? Or do you realize that maybe, just maybe, reality itself is changing around him? If you are ever in an old building and you see a handprint in the concrete that looks too deep, or a shadow that doesn't move when you do, don't touch it. Don't investigate. Just turn around and walk away. Because Elias Vane might be lonely in there, and he might be looking for a new audience for his stories. The walls are thin, and the frequency is always broadcasting. Can you hear the hum? This has been the case of the vanishing prisoner. A story with no body, no weapon, and no ending. Just a permanent echo in a concrete box. If you enjoyed this dive into the impossible, hit that subscribe button. Join the Guilty Crime family. We explore the cases the police are too scared to touch. Let me know in the comments. What is your theory on version 13? Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, the truth isn't always set in stone. Sometimes the stone eats the truth. Good night.